So I'm David Harradine, and
I'm Sam Butler.
We're the artistic directors of a company called Fevered Sleep, which is based in London, in the UK. Although actually neither of us live in London, so I live in a village in Yorkshire in the north of England, and Sam lives in a town called Reading outside London. So we kind of gather in London to work together as a company. We met at university in 1992, so we've been working together since then, so for 27 years. And we established the company after graduating in 1996. We work across art forms. I guess historically our roots are in theatre and certainly in performance. We did a performing arts degree, but it was very cross-disciplinary, so we were looking at theatre and dance and music and visual art, all very, very diverse mix of art forms were part of our education. And I think that is still really evident in the work that we make now as Fevered Sleep. And still, performance is still at the heart of what we do.
I think so. Yeah. In fact, if we don't make performance, people want to know why, or they'll presume that a project that we're doing is a show. That's always this grief thing. When is the show? Well, it isn't a show because we don't always make shows. That's quite difficult to make people understand why we work across art forms, really, and even outside art forms, in our own made-up art forms, I suppose. Yeah.
And the reason that we work like that, and I think the reason that sometimes people have this expectation that eventually there might be a show, when for us it's really clear that there's never going to be a show because that's not what we're aiming towards. I guess for lots of companies who are similar to Fevered Sleep, or perhaps artists who have a similar sort of background to us, I suppose the focus can often be on making something. Like, the starting point is, we're going to make our next show, we're going to choreograph our next dance piece, we're going to produce our next film. And for us, the idea of what we're going to make is never the starting point. It's always the last thing that we arrive at, really. And the starting point for us is always a question or a problem or an issue that we want to tackle through the work. So, for example, with our current project, Men and Girls Dance, we were interested in why there seemed to be a problem about men being in the presence of children. Or with another project, this grief thing, we were concerned about the fact that in certain communities in the UK or in Europe, grief appears to have to be hidden. So we wanted to make something about that. Or we wanted to make something about how humans respond to non-humans, or we wanted to make something about climate change. So we always start with a subject which we want to research. And the process of researching those subjects and investigating them together and with collaborators and with all sorts of different people, that process leads us to suddenly going, we should make a dance piece, or we should open a shop, or we should make a film. So we're often always as surprised as other people are, like, what's Fevered Sleep going to do next? And we often don't know what we're going to do next, which feels really important. I think it feels important to us that we can continue to surprise ourselves after 27 years of working together. I don't know that we would still be working together if we'd fallen into a pattern of how we did it. I fear that we might have become bored.
Yes, probably we would.
Because we're also, like, Sam's my closest friend and I'm her closest friend, so we spend a lot of time together when we're not working, and I think it's been really important that we don't ever really know what's going to happen next professionally with the company. I guess children haven't always been as central to our work as they are now. there was definitely a moment, wasn't there, when
there was.
our eyes kind of opened and we...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, exactly that. Or well, in fact, somebody came across us making our work for adults, because you leave university and that's what you do. You know, because if you're an important, good artist, you make work for adults, and other people make work for children. They're the other people who make that stuff that isn't as valuable or important or necessary. That was really short-sighted of us, wasn't it, to fall into that pattern until someone said, could you make what you make, this really visual, rich, exciting, abstract stuff, could you just do that for children? And we said, no, we cannot, we are artists. And she tried again, and we said, oh yes, of course, we should do that. And we started researching a piece that was about the ritual around food and dinner time for young children, 5-6-year-olds. I think so. And we absolutely loved the process of making it. It was an utter joy to us, and we could also see in the process and in the way we brought children into that process, and in what did turn out to be a performance, an installation performance. It was called Feast Your Eyes. It showed us so much more of what is possible in terms of making and thinking and creating and being with other types of people, which seems really obvious now.
No, but it really felt like an epiphany. It really felt like, a veil lifted, and suddenly we saw all these people who we hadn't really seen before professionally. Even though Sam had children at that point, we hadn't really made the connection, and then it became so obvious. So this kind of revelation was partly creative, as Sam said, and we have, embraced all the different possibilities of working with children in all different ways, fully embraced that since then. So it was a creative discovery, but also it felt really political to us. Like from the first project, it felt like there was something political about it, both kind of political for us as Fevered Sleep, but also kind of political more widely. And I guess for us, and I remember the conversation, I remember we made this project, Feast Your Eyes, and I know where we were when we had it, and I remember Sam saying, oh, now I know why Fevered Sleep exists. Like, now I know why we have set up this company and why we're making work. Because until that point, we'd kind of been making work because, we're best friends and we've gone to college together and we're going to graduate and carry on working together, and that's, oh, how lovely is that, and what a lovely time we're having, and so fucking what, really? Who cares about that apart from us? Yeah. And suddenly we did something where it felt like, okay, this project has real value, like we're interacting with people in a way which we've never really felt before, like with the adult arts audience who came to our previous project. I'm not really sure that felt like it had much value. It was very nice, but it didn't feel so purposeful. But with this project, we had a purpose. Like, okay, this is a thing which we want to commit to. And we made a very deep commitment really quickly to working with children, making work for children, collaborating with children, which exists still. And I guess, when was that? That was 2003? Yes. So we had about 7 dark years in the desert of working for adults, and then the remaining, whatever that is, 15, 16 years. We've been still making work with and for adults because we're still interested in that, but also really centrally to our practice, making work with and for children.
But I think that's part of the politics, is that this never would have happened, but if we had decided to drop the work for adults, then our desire to make or to add value or to heighten the value of art for children, it wouldn't have been the same, because it's us saying, this is our work for children, this is our work for adults, and they are of equal value. We do not separate them, apart from, obviously if age range appropriateness, well, that's kind of about it, really. In terms of in real terms, the money spent on our projects for children is the same as the amount we spend on stuff for adults, and that I think is really unusual.
More.
Yeah, often more. They're much more complex. definitely in the UK, there's an idea that a piece of work for children has to basically come out of a suitcase so that it can be performed upon somebody else's set that's been set up for a show for adults. And to us, that's a real statement about what we think about children and children with their families and their visit to engage with arts. It has to be really contained. It has to be very simple, and therefore equals simplistic. Therefore equals to me patronising. This sounds quite harsh, but it's true. It's where do we build that? How do we make that bigger if we're not even allowed to occupy more space for children? It's just ridiculous.
But you know, one of the really great and kind of unintended consequences of this way that we jump between art forms and then making this jump from working just thinking about adults to then thinking about children is that often we enter into a territory where we just don't know what the rules of that territory are. Like, we don't know. So with Men and Girls Dance, we're choreographers. We don't know how to be choreographers, so we invent the role of choreographers for this project. And that's part of, you know, what makes this project what it is, I think, how we approach that without any knowledge of how you're supposed to make a piece like this. So when we started to create performance work for children, and it was touring work, which is a significant fact, it was travelling to different venues, we didn't know that you were supposed to make a show that fit in a suitcase and that you could perform on somebody else's set in the theatre on a Saturday afternoon. We didn't know that you were supposed to only have one performer, or, you know, you only had such a small amount of money to spend on it. So we conceived these ridiculously complex pieces that would take 3 days to put into the theatre. So one of them was called And the Rain Falls Down, and the whole set was plumbed into the water mains. So it rained, there was a fountain, the floor flooded. Like, it was crazy how complicated it was. We made the show called The Forest, which had a huge metal floor and 14 real trees in the theatre, and we toured it to Australia. And we didn't do that because we weren't trying to make it difficult. We just didn't know we were supposed to make it simple. So we just made the work that we wanted to make. And for us, because I guess certainly in the performance work that we make, and certainly at that point, the kind of the design and the technicality of theatre or performance, the lights, the sound, they're often our starting point, much more than narrative or character. We're not really interested in that. It's always about the kind of sensual experience in a space. So we would make really ambitious work and then try to take it on tour. And we successfully took it on tour. And I think we were really lucky. I think we were doing that work at a point where in the UK there was a conversation about, there was a lot of frustration around the quality of the work for children, as Sam was talking about, and I think we just emerged into that with this kind of work, which was really, really ambitious, at a point where there were enough venues who were prepared to support it. You know, enough key people in key theatres or key arts centres who would programme it, who would give us a theatre for a whole week, who would pay a huge fee for a capacity of 30 and, you know, really small audiences and close-up engagement. But because those people and those venues did it, it was really clear to us that it's possible. And so for us, that also became really political. Like, it's possible, so why isn't everyone just doing this? Why aren't all the other artists being as ambitious and as brave and as reckless with their work for children as they are with their work for adults? Why aren't all the other theatres taking these kinds of risks to support experimental work?
And also, why are other companies not being funded properly to be able to do that?
Absolutely. So we ended up doing this research project called Future Play, which lasted for about 4 years, and we toured 3 of these kind of crazy pieces over, you know, kind of 1 year. We did one piece, We did the tours, but also there was an overarching piece of research around that, where we were just really trying to gather evidence to demonstrate that it was possible to do work like this, and trying to identify strategies that made it possible. So, you know, if a conventional touring performance was for children was something like Peppa Pig, you know, the cartoon character. Oh, well, that's going to be successful because all the parents have heard of Peppa Pig, the character, and all the children want to go and see the Peppa Pig show.
There's no risk there.
There's no risk. And then we tour a show called The Forest, and it's an experimental dance piece about human interaction with forest landscapes. And no one's heard of that. And then we're called Fevered Sleep, which is already a really weird sounding company. It's pretty off-putting and strange sounding. So how are you going to sell tickets for that? But it's totally possible. And one of the strategies that we developed was, rather than just turning up in a place, going on tour, turning up going, hello Nottingham, or hello Leeds, here's our show, why don't you come and see it? Well, because why would you? We would go to those places as part of our research process and visit schools, do workshops in the theatre, meet lots of children, meet their parents, talk with them, which then served two purposes. It would help us develop our ideas for the projects because we were interacting with children from the very outset and interacting with families from the very outset, not just working in isolation as artists, but also those children and families and schools and communities built up a relationship with us and with the work and with the venue, which meant that when we did go back with the finished piece, there were a load of people who went, oh, the forest, oh yeah. I remember we went to that wood and we were digging up worms and talking about trees, and it didn't matter that it wasn't Peppa Pig, the cartoon character from television, you know. But I think the research with children goes a lot deeper than that. We're not just doing kind of collaborative research with children to develop them as audiences, because when I hear myself saying that, it sounds quite cynical. I mean, it is, but if that's true, that works. But I think our desire to involve children in all of our research is much deeper than that.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess maybe we stumbled upon that as well, in that we started, like you were saying, embedding ourselves in these communities and these schools and inviting families or parties of school children into studios and presenting them with our very, very basic ideas right from the initial, we'll make something about light. Okay, so what we'll do is we want to see if we can test whether children of 3 years old can cope with being in the dark, because everyone says you can't do that to children. So of course we say, well, we're going to try, is that okay? And through that process of pushing against those things, because, that's another thing, I'll go off on a different tangent, but people, when you're making work for children, people will often say, oh, no, you can't do that. Oh, no, but we don't do, oh, no, but this is the rule. Oh, but that age group can't, and we don't, and you shouldn't, and you mustn't. So don't. And so obviously we say, oh, we can't? Oh, yes, we can, we will, we shall, we'll try that. It works, it's fine. Everything's going to be okay. The desire to do that, push against all that and ask more questions means that we want to get children in right from the beginning to test those really critical things. Because, if it's not okay to put a child of 3 into the dark, we really need to know that right from the beginning, not once we get into an auditorium with an audience full of screaming 3-year-olds because they're terrified of the dark. And so, yes, we have them right from the beginning. We tend to present with an idea, try it out, go into schools, and work with really diverse ranges of children as well. It's not like, okay, who are the children who will come to this theatre, who have already got connections to this theatre, and the families that will come. Well, it's always the same families who are there to get what they can, and brilliant for them. No, okay, who are the children who never get listened to, who never are asked the questions, who don't share their lived reality or their cultural understanding of the world with us, because it's just me and David otherwise. We are just us and our upbringings and everything that we carry with us. So we'll learn nothing unless we invite different types of people in. So we go to the schools in the areas where other artists don't go, or where they don't have the money to invite artists in, or to, like you say, go on a trip to the forest, because there's too much work to do and it's too expensive just to get a minibus together, all of that kind of thing. We have been lucky enough to be able to support that for a school that doesn't have a capacity or money or time. So, yeah.
do with these children and children in general learn from art and performance? Why is it important for kids?
I think it's interesting because my first response to that question, what can these children learn from art and performance? My desire is to say, actually, I'm more interested in what art and performance can learn from children. And I think for us as artists, that's really clear. And all of the ways that we involve children in developing the work that we make for children that Sam has described are really important to us. But I think it's also right for us to say that we also involve children in all the work that we're making for an adult audience, because I'm kind of repeating what Sam has just said, but we kind of feel that what we want our work to do, the reason that fevered sleep exists, and this is a thing that we've only come to realise relatively recently, the reason that fevered sleep exists is not so that Sam and I can have a nice time making projects. It's not to support us as artists. It feels like the company exists to make artworks that can start conversations between people, either literally start conversations or can get people thinking together differently, or can be provocative enough to kind of bring different people into very different points of view to have a disagreement with each other, that we somehow can facilitate all of that conversation, disagreement, debate, thinking, reflection through the work. And maybe that's what all artists want their work to do. I don't know, I can't speak for other artists, but we really actively try to make our work do that. So we'll really actively produce newspapers and booklets and podcasts that open up the conversation, or literally create physical spaces that invite people to come together to talk. And often we want to bring together children to talk and debate and be provocative and to be provoked, or to bring children and adults together into those spaces, or adults with other adults, and absolutely to bring together people of all ages from different cultures and different backgrounds and of different heritages, because our white English born in the 1970s point of view only gets us so far. And we want to go much, much further than that. Of course, we also believe that children can gain a lot from engaging with art and performance. Otherwise, we wouldn't do what we do as our job. We'd go off and do something different. But I mean, I guess we think that art and performance has a function which is necessary in society for everyone, including for children. I think we feel particularly political and a bit activist around it in relation to children, because I think we worry that in the UK, increasingly, we're getting it really wrong when it comes to children. Like the way that education is taking shape or has taken shape seems to be not really focused at all on the development of a child, and the kind of enrichment of a child's life and the fertilization of a child's imagination and potential for learning. That doesn't seem to really be the focus. Certainly, I think teachers try to do that, but I think government has got a different focus, which is on demonstrating which are the best schools, because they get the best test results. And that's really problematic. So I think we definitely feel that art and culture and artistic experiences can fill a gap which exists in the education system here, which can really celebrate children as citizens and celebrate them as people, celebrate their knowledge and their rights, their imaginations.
Maybe we should go on to men and girls dance. So the background, the process, and the role the children play. Audience.
Yeah, we'd love to. So men and girls dance, we can talk about how it came to be in the first place. Because Dave and I were just having a conversation, having held auditions for male contemporary dancers, actually, who, if you're in the room with 10, 15 contemporary dancers, it is always the most incredible experience, extraordinary, and I always feel really privileged to be able to be in that place. That is a privilege. And so having experienced that one day over a workshop of about 3 or 4 hours and feeling kind of moved and changed, and that I had connected with these extraordinary people who I'd never met before, and yet the thing about dancers is that they come into a space and they go, because that's what they do. They come together physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and just create stuff with themselves. That's a remarkable thing. And then alongside that, I have a daughter, and she was taking ballet classes, and I'd gone to see her end of term recital show when she was 7. And it's a very different thing, two very different bodies, two very different types of dance, and also a thing about this audience with these girls probably mostly will never get to experience any type of dance ever again, because children here tend to go up to the age of 10 and then they drop ballet unless they're going on to something more than that. And so they won't ever dance again, most of them. Obviously I'm generalising, but from my experience. And also the parents or the carers of those girls, those children, probably will never see any other type of dance again. And I felt a bit saddened by that. I thought, wow, that's strange. How would it be to bring those two people together, these men, these girls, ballet and contemporary dance? That would be visually amazing, and also to bring the two communities of audiences and participants together would also be amazing. And in different dance spaces, bring this audience into an incredible dance space like Sadler's Wells, or bring this audience into the village hall where you normally see ballet recitals. Maybe mix those things. So we started doing that, and we started approaching venues and partners and saying we want to do that. The response on the one hand was really positive from some people, but actually overwhelmingly it was pretty negative. Which was, well, you just can't do that because that's a bit weird and creepy and strange, and it makes us feel not right. And we were astonished. So what do you mean? How can that be a negative thing in any way? And it's the very thought of having men in the same space with girls, with children, and that alone was enough for people to say, "Don't, you can't, you mustn't, you shouldn't." Back to that again. So of course we said, okay, then we will and we shall, and that's what we're going to do. And incidentally, and also because the working title was Men and Girls Dance, just because that's what we'll call it. And when people said, okay, we'll let you make this show and we'll let you tour it to our venue and we'll support it, but you must not call it that because that's just going to put people off. And so we said, okay, so that's what we're going to call it. We like to make it really difficult for ourselves, but that felt really political. So the very title, the very words in that sequence, Men and Girls Dance, is problematic. Wow. Well, then that might get people coming to see what we want to show them and the questions we want to ask, hopefully. So
yeah, once again, something that we hadn't realised was political became political, kind of because of our ignorance. Because I'm a man, Sam's a woman. I'm incredibly close to her children and hang out with them, and it hadn't even occurred to us that there might be an issue with this project, and then suddenly there clearly was an issue. So the project which Men and Girls Dance is now is very, very different from that project that we'd imagined, that Sam had described. I mean, it's still related to it, but its focus is absolutely on this problem. Like, why is it a problem, men being in the presence of children in this country at this time? And of course, we're not stupid, we're not naive. There are adults, most of whom are men, who want to harm children. That's a fact. But the vast majority of us don't. But the vast majority of us, at best, are self-conscious when we're close to other people's children, often are under suspicion when we're close to other people's children, and at worst are confronted and kind of told to stop doing something when we're in the presence of other people's children. And that just needs to not be the case, because in those kind of situations, men lose out on the possibility of a really normal, natural, healthy relationship with children, and children lose out on the possibility of a really normal, natural, healthy relationship with men who are not necessarily their fathers or brothers or family members or teachers. And so this piece, Men and Girls Dance, really is a celebration of the possibility of that. And I guess what we've tried to create in the theatre, it's not a narrative piece really. It's not about the problem. It's not, there are no scenes of different kinds of encounters, positive and negative on the whole. It really is a proposition for a different way of being, we think. It's somehow a heightened version of what we wish the world was already like, a world in which children and adults, and specifically children and men, and I guess really specifically girls and men, a space in which these different people can interact with each other, play together, investigate each other, become interested in each other, learn about each other, dance with each other, touch each other, trust each other, love each other. Like that's what the piece is, and that's all that the piece is. And in a way, it's incredibly simple. And I guess for us, the process of creating it, and in each place that we present it, we work with a group of girls from the local community. So we always recreate it. And we have about 10 days from when we first meet as a company to the first performance. And really all that happens in that 10 days, and our role as choreographers, directors, facilitators, our role is just, all we do is to create the conditions in which the men and the girls can come to trust each other, enjoy each other, love each other, respect each other, and be with each other. And we slightly guide that towards different things that they might call performing, and some of it is performative, and there's definitely some dancing, but there's also just a lot of being, together and sharing the same space. And it just makes it's a strange piece, I think, for us, for me, for both of us, I think. When I watch it, I'm so happy that we've created it. I'm so happy that it exists in the world, and I say that with a lot of humility. It's not because I think it's a great piece, I don't mean that. I'm just glad that it's possible for this space to exist, for these children and these men. It makes me immensely sad that it's in a private space, inside a theatre, not just out there in the world all the time. And I guess that's where the politics of it is for us, the possibility that it might be a little seed that might grow out of the theatre and change something out there, that in their future these girls will be different women, and they will have different daughters, maybe, and these men will have different relationships, and those people that watched it might think differently when they see a man stood at the school gates, waiting for somebody else's children, to not worry so much about him. That's what we hope might happen.
I have noticed that for several artists it has been this a big, overwhelming experience to work with children, because they realize how full of rules and inhibitions the adult life is, and maybe the male role in society is even more full of what you can do and what you can't than the women's role. And so it seems like in many of these collaborations, the presence of a child is a permission for the adult to play. And play means to break down the rules and question the rules and invent new ones. That was a long question, but so I'm also thinking, so what do you think the children gain from this?
I mean, it's huge, really. And there's so much to say. It is a really simple thing that we make and do in bringing those men and those girls together. And yet you can see so much happening in that space with them in the rehearsal room, and in everything that we do to give them the tools to be able to perform this show, which is choreographed, but also a huge part of it is improvised. So we have to enable them and empower them to be able to do that. And there's something about, like, the youngest child is 8, and it's 8 to 11 years. Even by the age of 8, they have already unlearned how to how to just be a child and to play to a huge extent, because through schooling that naturally happens. And when a child is in the presence of adults, and adults who are, yes, we are in charge, of course we attempt to give them equal footing and equal ability to speak, but ultimately it has to be directed, it has to have a kind of a form in order for it to present as a show and to have a beginning, a middle and end, you know. But they come to us with the knowledge that they're supposed to be quiet, and they're supposed to line up, and they're supposed to sit in straight lines, generally, and that they're supposed to ask if something that they're doing is correct and is what we were wanting from them, and is it okay if they should be lifted, and they should always have their weight taken by an adult. You know, it's physical, it's emotional, it's verbal, it's all the rules of how you are as a child in a space with an adult, because adults are in charge all the time. And in a way, Men and Girls Dance is, in a very short time, asking those children not to do that anymore. And in that also includes the children. Some of the children have danced, lots of them have never danced, but some children come with already a dance vocabulary. We're asking them to unlearn that as well, which is really tough, a little bit mean, but we say that they can put that back on again afterwards, because we want them to look like children and to be children, and also to be individual children themselves. Where in any place where children are asked to perform, they're always asked to put on a performance of a child, of an adult's conceived way of how a child should perform. Well, we're asking them not to perform. We say to them, we don't want any acting. Stop acting. So we want you to do it like that, and it needs to be a little bit like this, and it needs to have this energy, but please do not act that. That is a really difficult concept, and I don't know how they get that, but they do every time. They always get it. Like, we want you to go onto that stage, and we want it to be different from last night, even though we told you that moment last night was brilliant. Don't do it like that. Do it differently. It's amazing. And so when they've got that, when they have got that within a couple of days, that we want them actually just to be themselves as individuals, and that we don't care if they can point their toes, or who can do the best cartwheels, or, you know, who's had the training to be able to do gymnastics. We're not interested in seeing that stuff actually necessarily. That kind of that showing off, that showing of who's the best and who has the best skills. They kind of relax and are just themselves, and now we've got you. Now we want you to do that on stage. And when they are able to do that, then the adults dancers, who in a way I feel like adult contemporary dancers, that is, or at least the ones that we invite to work with us, they're the people we're wanting to be there with those children, because they need to match the child. So the child is being a child as themselves, and the performer, the type of performer we want is a performer that can be very much like a child, that's open-minded, open-hearted, free, the ability to respond really naturally in the moment, and to let themselves be totally open to all those 250 people examining them and judging them and wondering what they're thinking and feeling and why their face looks like that and why they feel a bit awkward or a bit quirky or whatever it is. So, yeah, that was a long answer. But it's quite difficult to pin down what the essence of what we want a child to be in this piece. But it's an adult to be the same as a child, and a child to be the same as this adult performer.
Is it something? I mean, is it something as simple as what we want the children who are in this project to understand and to believe that all they need to be is who they are, not who they're told they are supposed to be? It's really simple. But it's really incredible how much they are who they think they're supposed to be when they arrive, behaving how they're supposed to behave, saying the kind of things they're supposed to say, doing the sorts of improvisations that they think we want them to do. And yeah, I think for us, the greatest, what we hope is the greatest gift that we can give to the girls who take part in this project is just over and over and over and over again saying to them, you being yourself is the most important thing. Who you are is exactly who we're interested in. The less you do what others have told you to do, the more we want to support that. You can do anything. You're in charge. The men are not in charge. Don't let men be in charge. Men do not rule the world. Now go on stage and do the show. But really, it's not really about men do not rule the world. Well, men do rule the world. There's a different world in which girls are empowered differently. And we create a microcosm of that world in the theatre. And again, we hope that some of that empowerment leaves with the girls at the end of the project. And that's more important than do they have performance experience, or are they better dancers, or do they know how to devise? Like, yeah, they have those things too, but we're not so bothered about that.
Do you think the children and adults are any different at all?
I mean, of course they're different developmentally, you know, and I think ages ago in this conversation you said something about, you know, our work for children being age appropriate, and I know that what you meant was not age appropriate in terms of content, because we think all content is appropriate for all children, you know, but I think you meant age appropriate in terms of who a person is in the world, because a person who's 2 has a very different relationship to the world and to other people than a person who's 5 or a person who's 50. That's just a fact, and that's to do with development. And, you know, the 50-year-old, on the whole, has a complete understanding of where imagination ends and reality begins. And for a 2-year-old, there's no distinction between imagination and reality. And that's developmental. It's to do with the brain and the kind of body and hormones. So on that level, of course, we know that adults and children are different, and we take a lot of care understanding those differences when we're developing work for people of different ages. But on a basic level of kind of human rights and being a citizen and being a political agent and having agency, no, we don't think there is any difference, or we don't think there should be any difference. I think society produces huge differences, which perhaps we try to push against a little bit through some of our work. When we were talking before, you mentioned something, I think, you know, of this future play, the research project, and we made this booklet, and it has a manifesto in the back, kind of some of our kind of core beliefs about making work with children or for children, collaborating with them. And there's one of the kind of points in this manifesto is I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but it's something like, we really need to love and respect children, and or something like that. We need to love children. And I think on the whole, on a societal level, in this country, we don't think children are loved very much at all. We fear that they're often hated.
Hated and controlled.
Hated and controlled. And there's a very strange paradox. And we're about to embark on making a new project, which will explore this. And it's a new performance piece performed entirely by children. And really it's about this strange aspect of childhood where on the one hand, we appear to revere children. We all want the best for them. We all want them to have wonderful lives. We want to support them to be adventurous and to be free on our terms at the times when we want to do that. And in other contexts, on a societal level, we absolutely need them to be under control. We want them to be childlike, but not too much like children. Because if they're too much like children, they're not enough like adults. And then that's quite dangerous, because they start to resemble animals rather than humans. You know, they're wild, they're free, their imaginations run riot. So we find the contradictions between all of that very, very strange.
And rich.
enrich territory for exploring. And as part of that project also, I think a key focus of it, which relates to this, is that, the process of becoming an adult, it's partly physiological and natural, of course. There's a physical change that happens. Nobody can, on the whole, prevent that. You don't have to work at that part. But children are definitely trained. They're trained to be a certain kind of adult that perpetuates capitalism, that perpetuates consumption, that reproduces all of the things that are wrong with the world at the moment. A child in the West, certainly, as a good model capitalist consumer. That's what we train our children to be. Inadvertently, because we want the best for them. And so we're training children to be the kind of adults who are fucking up the world for children. I mean, this seems to us to be insane. I don't know if it's true, but that kind of crazy point of view on what we're doing with children seems to us like a really great starting point for a collaboration with them. And then you look at, Greta Thunberg, the climate strikes, the children's campaigners. You look around and go, oh yeah, also the children have noticed this, that really they're inheriting a world which is screwed and they don't want it. So I guess this project which we're interested to make, it's about creating a creative space in which some children can maybe develop some of those ideas for themselves and articulate them somehow. We don't really know what that will look like in practice. But again, it's really political. I don't think there's no other, all the different strands of work that we have, the preoccupation with landscape and climate and weather and the non-human and different kind of challenging states of experience like grief. I don't think any of them. Only that our preoccupation with children has lasted for such a long time and has gone so deeply into everything that we've done. Mm-hmm. I think they are really at the core of who we are as a company and who we are as artists, and that's not always apparent in the work that we make. In Many Girls Dance, they're very, very visible. They're right there on stage looking at the audience, and in some of the other work they're more hidden in the background in the research process. But I mean, Fevered Sleep wouldn't exist if, going right back to what Sam said, if that producer hadn't at that time said, why don't you do something for children, I think we'd have lost our way. I think we'd have lost our way. I think we'd have lost interest, or we would be a different company doing work that I'm really, really glad that we're not doing. I'm really, really glad that we're not that company and that we're the company that we are, because we're really lucky. We have a lot of privilege. We're really fortunate as a company. We're old enough to have been of a generation where we could graduate from university and we didn't have to work. We could live on benefits from the government and be artists who weren't paid. That doesn't exist for people anymore. We're both from poor backgrounds, but we still manage to be artists. That doesn't really exist anymore for many people without private wealth. That's a massive generalisation, but it's a problem that we're facing in this country.
And we're aware of it.
And so we know that we have this really privileged position because our company has been successful, and we don't take that for granted. And I'm just really glad that one of the things we can do with this opportunity called Fevered Sleep is to go on and on and on and on and on about the importance of children, the value of children, the rights of children, the creativity of children, the power of children. The kind of power they have over us is quite a thing.
Well, yeah, because we love them.
Yeah.
And I know it's a lot like what you have just been talking about, but I would still like maybe you to say a little bit again about what that work with children gives you. I mean, was this eye-opener, so to speak, that what it does to an adult to start working with children?
Yeah, I think quite like to talk about that in terms of the audience as well, as me as a collaborator with children. I mean, when working with children, and because they're not professional performing children, which that's a kind of a different category. These are children who are not performers, and we're very specific about that. Like, we want children who are just children. They enter a space with you, a research space, and they're already wide-eyed, or what are we doing here? What is it you want from us? What are we going to learn from you? Because that's what they're used to having to know. And I think because we reflect that back at them and say, actually, we're not really sure what we want from you, or what you're going to show us, or what you're going to tell us, because there's so much in there, and we want to be able to look at you individually and know you individually and understand what your quirks are, and what you can tell us about the world, and what you can tell us about your how you are in the world. And I suppose that we get that from them just by not giving them very much. In a way, it's very easy to guide children so that they give you what you're asking for. So, and children are used to that. What is it you want us to tell you? Well, we're not gonna tell you what we want you to tell us, if that makes sense. So we're going to give you a wide open space, and we're going to play some games. And so children understand games. They understand that in the playing of games, they can be totally themselves, because that's when you see their energy, and that's when you see how much they care about winning, or whether they don't care about winning, or whether that makes them feel a bit vulnerable, or whether that makes them feel like, I'm not very sporty, so you're judging me. It's all those different things just through play we put out there, and you can kind of immediately see a child's personality within a 5-minute game of playing something really simple like, I don't know, Stuck in the Mud, which is a game we play here quite a lot, which is just about running around and physical contact, really simply, and about connecting with another human being that you don't know very well. And you learn so much about the person that you make contact with within seconds. And it's through those games, and we always start every rehearsal day and every rehearsal session with a game. We rarely start with a big conversation or a big presentation of what we're going to do. It's like, let's play a game. Go, bang. That child is like that, or she feels that way, and that makes her feel awkward, or she loves to do it that way. Or we're going to play a game with a ball, which is a bit like tennis, and you might not be very good at tennis, and therefore you think you're not going to be very good at this game, and therefore you think that we're not going to like you. It's all those intricacies of human nature and human spirit are just there in a game. And I feel like when we offer that, we can get so much back from children that we could probably just create. That's what Men and Girls Dance is. It's just a series of games. Actually, there's a secret. And that's all we want to see. We want to see that from the children. We want to see that from the men. And putting those human beings together on stage playing, you see so much. For an audience, which I think is why people have an extraordinary experience when they see Men and Girls Dance, is that they see themselves reflected, because we allow children to just be themselves, and the men just to be themselves. And I think that's so rare to see. Someone in being natural, and also you're not allowed to just look at children. It goes back to what the whole project's about. That is not okay to sit there for an hour and look very directly at a child. It's not permitted. So in allowing people to do that, it opens up so much of the ability to see what humans are like and who we are as humans. And that's what art is. For me, that's what art is.
Can I add something really briefly, just around the questions about what can adults learn from children, or what can adults gain from children? I want just to say something briefly about that. And we could talk for an hour just about this. But I think maybe I have a slight... I take issue that it's often said that adults or adult performers can learn play from children. Like we can relearn how to play by being in the presence of children. And I worry about that as a way to think about working with children, because it seems to reduce children to people who can play. What can children do? Oh, they're really good at play, so we can learn how to play from them. And I think that may be true, but I think children are much, much, much more than their ability to play. I've learned loads of intellectual stuff from working with these children. I've learned all sorts of emotional stuff. I've learned about all kinds of complicated experiences of living in the world, which these children face on a daily basis, which I don't face, and I've learned about them. I've learned about my privilege. I've learned how to be a better person with greater empathy. I've learned how to be brave. I mean, I've learned so much more than how to play because of working for the last 15 years with children. And they've learned a lot more from me than how to make art and performance. You know, kind of, again, I think as Sam said, we're most interested in the real human stuff. Like we are all the same in as much as we're all people who have a unique understanding of being a person who lives in the world. And I can learn an infinite amount of stuff from an 8-year-old who lives a different life from me. And she can learn an infinite amount of stuff from me. And the fact that I'm an artist and she's a child, are just one part of that, one tiny part of that, two tiny parts of that.
We are almost closing now, but a bit about future plans. I mean, how you are proceeding.
So in the future, we're making this piece about being a child with children as co-creators, and probably as a performance piece. We've done quite a lot of research already, so we do have a sense that it will be a performance piece, because there's something about the encounter between children performing and adults witnessing that, which is important to us, to open up a conversation. We have this project called Sheep, Pig, Goat, which is about interspecies empathy, which we're developing in collaboration with one of the university veterinary schools, so where vets, animal doctors, go to train. We're doing some work with one of these colleges to explore. There's this really scary statistic or piece of research which demonstrates that as a student goes through the training of becoming a vet, their levels of empathy towards animals decrease. And our project is all about cultivating curiosity and genuine interest and empathy, or at least interest, in another species. So it's going to be really interesting for us to develop that project, an art-based project in a science medical training institution, and probably quite provocative for the students who are in that space, which feels really good.
We are continuing to open more shops around grief for people who are grieving and for people who are not, and have lots of conversations about that as well. So.
And then finally, we have a project called the Institute of Everything, which is a collaboration with a primary school in York, which is a city in the north of England. And we're just coming to the end of an initial research year with this school. And we have, in this country, art and creativity has been taken out of the curriculum really actively by government. And this project is about putting art and creativity back into education, but not so that the children can be creative and make things, but because art and creativity, art is a way of critical thinking, art is a way of thinking, art is a way of learning, art is political. So the project is about putting art and artists back into school to cultivate really engaged political thinking. And we're just coming to the end of the initial year, and that will carry on as a collaboration with that particular school in the future, but hopefully expand to other schools as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.